The Death with Dignity Act was enacted by Oregon in 1997 and allows the terminally ill to end their lives through the voluntary self administration of lethal medications prescribed by a physician for that purpose. According to Oregon.gov, only 5 states since 1997, so within the past 15 years, have passed this law. While it has not been very popular outside of these states, one recent case has sparked a new realm of controversy in the debate as to whether or not this law is ethical. For those who do not know, within this past year, a woman by the name of Brittany Maynard released a video stating that she had been diagnosed with a rare form of stage 4 brain tumor that would likely take her life in the next couple of months. This is a picture of Brittany Maynard on her wedding day, probably about a couple of months before she was diagnosed with this brain tumor. After receiving this information, she made what many would call a courageous decision to spend the next couple of months with her family and then move to Oregon, where she could legally end her life with the help of a physician so that she would not have to face the horror of how the cancer might take her. This is a picture of Brittany only probably about a month before she died, and it was probably about a couple of months after the wedding pictures were taken or after she had been diagnosed. So you can see in the pictures how fast this cancer was progressing inside of her. The question is, though, from a Christian perspective, is it morally correct to accept death with dignity or assisted suicide as heroic? And I would submit to you that it's not, for 3 reasons. Number 1, suicide is suicide. 2, life is a gift from God, tainted by sin, which results in death appointed by God. 3, man is essentially playing God when he takes upon the responsibility of deciding when life ends, which can lead to more serious problems later on. While anyone could understand the reasons that Brittany made the decision that she did, I believe that as Christians it is important to consider the implications of accepting death with dignity laws or euthanasia as heroic. It's important to realize that those who do not agree with the decision made by Brittany do not do so to undermine the aggressive nature of cancer. Cancer is an enemy fought by thousands of people on a daily basis, but so are problems like depression, loneliness, mental illness, and other sicknesses which may lead people to commit suicide. The National Violent Death Reporting System in 2008 reported that the number one reason for suicide was problems within an intimate relationship. The question is that if it is unacceptable in society and under Christian viewpoints to quote-unquote take the easy way out by ending one's own life in situations like these, what makes a case like Brittany's any different? Yes, an illness like cancer is hard to face, but it's no different than any other problems which lead people to suicide on a daily basis. Another poll shows that if we as a society call euthanasia what it really is, which is suicide, 19% less of Americans support it than when we call it just physicians' help in having a painless death. Christians should live their lives with the perspective that life is a gift from God, tainted by sin, which results in death appointed by God. It is not meant for a person to decide when his or her life on earth is over. God created everyone with a purpose and expects his people to live every day possible for his honor and glory, because in 1 Corinthians 6:20 it says, "We are not our own. He is the omniscient creator and has prearranged a life as well as a time for death for all of us, and we have no idea when that time will come. Since God is the only one who is all-knowing, consequently, doctors cannot be. This means that even when healing seems impossible and death seems like the inevitable, not even doctors can predict what the future holds. Believers can only trust that the great physician who is just to not only give and take life, but can heal in miraculous ways. As terrifying as it is to face such an illness while on earth, one can have peace in knowing that it is not condemning, but can only bring him closer to eternity. For Christians, the suffering and death is only temporary because God provided a way out by sending his Son to take the atonement for our sins. Lastly, if God is truly the giver and taker of life, then who are we to decide when it is our time to go? We're not to make that decision on our own, and when we do, we are putting ourselves in God's place. Accepting assisted suicide can lead to abuse of the prescribed drug, questions as to whether or not it is morally correct to perform stem cell research, or even if it is okay for a parent to have say over whether or not the pregnancy or life of a child with chances of low quality of life should be ended. In each of these circumstances, an individual is taking God's responsibilities into his own hands, which is a path that followers of Christ should not want to go down. Without being insensitive toward others' feelings and hardships, Christians should be very careful to consider the implications of accepting death with dignity laws. Life itself is a gift from God that was tainted by sin, but can be made whole if we live every day for Christ. We might not always be able to see it, but He is able to do anything, and He has a master plan for us. We should allow God's plan to work in and through us and not take matters that are His into our own hands.